Yeah, right. So this is where a legal path would bring us, right? So, this is why you cannot win. Basically, this video is all about why this is an unwinnable position here, and we have to be mature enough to accept that. But we have to, at least go through it, right? Talk it through. That's what we're going to be doing today, right? So the SEC, sorry, the NSSC, the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia, right? Let's say, for example, we file for the declaratory relief, which would be great because then we can get discovery and we can force her to sit down and get grilled, right? And we can put her in the hot seat and really, grill her these questions. Like I made another video about that, and that would be great. But at trial, let's say, for example, I don't even know if we get to discovery, right? They probably summarily dismiss the whole thing. Probably not even get to discovery. If we're lucky, we can get to discovery, right? That's the thing. I don't believe that we could. I think it's going to be summarily shut down, right? So that's a high. The likelihood is basically 100%. Then the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal likely dismissed again. Right? You know how they are, right? They're very, very. They're just rubber stamping, right? Rubber stampers, and that's what I like to call them. The Nova Scotia Court of Appeal. A great bunch of guys for little stuff, but these big questions here about the law, well, you have to leave it to the professionals, right? So let's say, for example, the Supreme Court of Canada gets wind of this. You want to escalate this matter. So you want to persuade them to grant leave, which is, discretion. This is by discretion, discretionary, right? So if leave is granted, which probably not going to be, you want to know, is there any chance of winning, even though you're right on moral grounds? And the answer is probably no, right? So who's got the time and money to do all that? Well, some guy, maybe, or maybe not. Right, so let's go to number one. Right, so step one is not the Nova Scotia Supreme Court because we know we're not going to win. Right, it's not going to be win. So the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal, even expect to lose a trial, you must lay a solid constitutional record for appeal. Here are possible appealable issues you can raise. So, for example, the violation of the freedom of religion, right? Freedom of conscience, right? This is my conscience. I cannot imagine, especially when I am 50% the father, right, that my child, deserves to not only die but have his whole existence wiped away from the record, right? So that's so and also you're being compelled to financially support what you sincerely believe it is the killing of a human beings, right? So your violation, a violation of your deepest moral and religious convictions, right? So we're being forced to be complicit in this ridiculous crime against humanity. All right, so the ultra vires use of municipal taxation powers. So you can argue that municipal government is stepping outside its constitutional mandate by funding a morally contentious and federally regulated medical procedure. So this is a serious thing, right? We're using the taxes, the property taxes are being used to fund the killing of children, right? It's ridiculous. Um, Discrimination, right? The unborn human beings discriminated against on the basis of developmental stage, dependency, or location, right? In the womb of the mother, in utero. And this is government sanctioned, right? So there's some constitutional arguments here you can raise and all that stuff. So violation 7, rights to life. Of a born or unborn person, it doesn't matter, right? You are still a human being. Even though the current jurisprudence doesn't recognize unborn charter rights, you could argue that the legal vacuum around fetal rights is not constitutionally sustainable in light of scientific knowledge about prenatal human life, right? The law is disagreeing with science. Well, that's just, the laws, the lawyers or the lawmakers are wrong and science is correct, right? So, where do you want to be, right? Do you want to be on the side of truth or folly, right? And so the lack of informed consent, false framing of abortion as health care. You can argue that funding abortion as medical care when it ends a human life is a misrepresentation that distorts legal truth and undermines public trust. I certainly don't trust them. They're they're lunatics, right? So here's step two, right? And how to persuade the Supreme Court of Canada to hear the case, right? The Supreme Court of Canada grants leave to fewer than 10% of applicants. To persuade them, you must frame your case as raising a novel question about national public importance, right? A constitutional issue with wide societal implications, which I do believe this has, a conflict or gap in the law, which I do believe this has, and a potential to clarify or develop the law. Well, what is the law? Thou shalt not kill, right? You can't really develop it more than that, but you certainly can try to make some. It's not these types of cases, right? Case law do not supersede "Thou shalt not kill." It's so easy that my wonderful daughter, who's going to be 4 today, in just a few short hours, right at midnight, she will be 4 years old, right? We are in the year 2025 right now. She understands very, very clearly, "Thou shalt not kill," right? It's a very clear very clear to so to develop domestic law, it could be. This case could clarify or develop the law, right? So you must show that your case isn't just about you or Nova Scotia, but about whether a Canadian citizen can be forced to fund acts that they believe are morally equivalent to homicide with no recourse. I would not say they believe, because it is whether you believe it or not. I'm just going to actually remove it, that are morally equivalent to homicide. All right, so there's this belief aspect. So let's say, for example, you believe that it doesn't equate homicide. Well, yeah, it is still. There's a destruction of a life, which we've proven here beyond any doubt at all. So it doesn't really matter if you believe it or not, right? So anyway, um, so frame it as a charter rights collision, your freedom of conscience versus the government's current interpretation of healthcare, and the public interest in protecting life versus the unrestricted taxpayer-funded, abortion, right? So then, if, it's probably not, but if the Supreme Court grants leave, then what? This is the hardest part to predict based on the current legal precedent. See, Morgenthaler, right? Morgenthaler and Dobson. So is the ideological makeup of the court, and the odds of winning outright are extremely low. But you could succeed in getting the courts to acknowledge limits on to what governments may fund using taxes when it violates conscience. So you might create dissenting opinions, right? That become the seed for future decisions, as Justice Wilson's opinion in Morgenthaler once was. So you could put fetal right and public conscience rights on the national stage in a structured legal argument, forcing reconsideration. And if you're strategically aiming for long-term impact, not just a win in your case, even a narrow ruling or a strong dissent could become the foundation for future legal or political reforms. So the final thoughts on the predicted outcome. Um, so the leave of the leave to appeal, very difficult to obtain, but possible with strong constitutional framing and national relevance. So the likelihood of a final ruling in your favor would be extremely slim under current Canadian jurisprudence. So the value in pursuing it anyway, right? So yeah, yes, especially at discovery in the Supreme Court in Nova Scotia. If your goal is to create case law, spotlight moral contradictions, and preserve the record for future generations and potential legal change, the arc of law can be long. It bends slowly, but with pressure, precedent, and persistence, it can eventually bend towards truth. Right. So we got these guys, these liars, right, and they like to dress up as lawyers, but they're just outright liars. So let's go back here. Let's go back here. So what would be the pathway, right? So definitely 100%, the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia will, she will be acquitted, or how should I say that? She will be found not culpable, or how should I say this? Uh, the declaratory relief will not be granted, I guess you could say, because I'm not filing for a criminal charge, which she's clearly guilty of murder. And her the rightful penalty would be a life imprisonment. Without the chance for parole for 25 years to be served concurrently for all of the children that she killed, right? All of the 1,000 plus children that she killed. And make no mistake, She is culpable, right? She's culpable for over 1,000 deaths, right? Over 1,000 deaths. The count could be as high as 1,000 counts, right? 1,000 counts of murder, right? That is what it should be, right? But the only reason that we have this is because we have these people that are hell bent on ensuring its continuance, on ensuring on the abortion industry's continuance, that they will create this type of nonsense court here that you just cannot win, right? So the whole point about this video is that you cannot win, right? There's only one way to to win this, and it'd be with a type of a military offensive. That's the only way you could win. But who's going to go there? Not me. I'm not even in that place. I don't even care enough to do that, and I probably will lose anyway. So there's no way that you can win. Um, so the only way to win is to take an example of what could happen, and you say, okay, it's going to lose anyway, and then these windbag, loudmouths, obnoxious feminists are winning, and there's nothing you can do until our society's extremely so far gone down the drain that what can you do, right? We have to acknowledge defeat, right? We have to acknowledge defeat. We have to be mature and acknowledge defeat, and stand on the right side of history. But what history will be left? Oh man, that's a terrible question, man. That's a haunting question. What history will be left? We're on the right side of history, but which history, right? What history will be in the future? Well, we'll see. So then, the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal, likely 100%, sure, without any doubt at all, it'll probably be dismissed again, right? Then the Supreme Court. Well, will they even accept? Well, they grant leave, right? And the answer is probably no. So where can we appeal this, right? And well, I'm going to explain to you very, very clearly where this will be appealed to, and that will be the final judgment. Okay, so that's the good thing about this, right? There will be a final judgment, and they will say, hey, there's an error in law here. The final judgment, and you can find that in the Book of Revelation, right? In the last book of the Bible, you see the final judgment. These clowns, they like to think this is the final judgment, but it most certainly is not. No, they're just they're just clowns, not granting leave to this extremely important case that could save the lives of millions of people. No, 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 we're just not going to grant the leave. Yeah, I know that's what they're going to do, right? And I know the Supreme Court justice is just going to be like, yeah, what's going to happen? I'm going to explain to you exactly what's going to happen. Okay, let's say, for example, I were to file for declaratory relief, so declaratory relief, declaratory, well, however you want to pronounce that. Declaratory is fine. Let's say, for example, I do file that. I'm probably going to get they're going to get their motion for summary conviction granted. That's what's going to happen. A motion for summary conviction. Yeah, we're going to grant this. That's what's going to happen, right? So let's be honest and real. And then the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal is not going to hear it, and that's the end of the story. Right? Or is it? Right? Well, no. There's a final judgment here. So very but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the final judgment, right? And certainly on the right path, the legal path, right? The moral path here. The final judgment is at the end, right? The final judgment, the final. It's people know it as the Great White Throne judgment, or the Great White Throne, where there's a judge that will judge all things. Right, and this is certainly going to be one of the issues that are up for debate. Right, is there the legal personhood according to the Great White Throne Judgment, according to God? Well, God's going to be like, yeah, all right, that's a baby, right, and we are in agreement with the nature and all that stuff, right? Not the laws of the false nonsense, right? This is really some twisted stuff here. How they can make up these laws with their own minds, that goes against science, right? And then a whole bunch of our society gets thrown under the bus. But that's what we have here. So what's the likelihood is there? The likelihood is, like I said here. Oh yeah. Oh, you got this. Oh, I'm so very happy to see this motion for summary judgment. Motion for summary judgment here. Yeah, we're gonna strike down the whole thing, and that's the end of it. Then I'm gonna appeal, and then be like, oh, we're not hearing your appeal, and or they're gonna they're going to pretend they're going to hear the appeal, and then after that, the Supreme Court will not grant leave if that were to even happen. That's what's really realistically going to happen. But it doesn't mean that's the final outcome at the Great White Throne Judgment. I promise you that. I promise you that. That's really, really. That's I promise you that. I promise you 100%. All right. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.